A star wide receiver could be hitting the market. If Brandon Aiyuk becomes available in a trade, is he the right fit for the Jets? We'll go through the pros and cons today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, February 15th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Well, with the Super Bowl over, it's officially the NFL offseason, which means speculation about star players changing teams has already begun. And over the last couple of days, there's started to become some buzz about San Francisco 49ers receiver Brandon Aiyuk potentially looking for a trade. Today, we're going to talk about whether or not he would be a good fit for the New York Jets if he hit the open market. Now, I think we need to begin by acknowledging that the trade talk around Aiyuk at the moment is very thin. It's essentially based on people parsing some post-game comments he made after the Super Bowl in the locker room in a very emotional time. It's also a social media post apparently his girlfriend made referencing how it could be the last time at Levi's Stadium, the 49ers home stadium. Now, another thing to note is that a lot of times, when players make public comments like this, it's posturing. They're trying to negotiate a new deal with their team. And I think everybody would acknowledge that it's probably in San Francisco's interest to keep Brandon Aiyuk because he's a tremendous receiver. He's entering the prime of his career. He'll be 26 a month from now, a guy who's just coming off his best season and has a lot of good football in front of him. So there's no indication the 49ers are going to make him available. You may remember a couple of years ago, there was another player with the 49ers, playmaker Deebo Samuel. And for a stretch, there was talk that, maybe the 49ers would make him available in a trade. I was very much in favor of the Jets potentially making a deal for Deebo Samuel, and it did not happen. Deebo ended up re-signing with the 49ers. You keep your core players. I mean, that's the way it works in the NFL for the most part. But of course, there are always instances where a player becomes available in a trade, and it's up to you to explore it. So how would Brandon Aiyuk be a good fit for the Jets? Well, he'd fit the team like a glove, to be honest with you. Again, he's entering 26 years old, about to be 26 years old in a month. March 17th is his birthday. So he's entering the prime of his career. So we don't have to worry about any of the other stuff like, is this guy too old? He's not too old. He's entering the prime of his career. And I've been very vocal that I think this offseason, the Jets should be focused on players who are getting their second contracts, because guys who are in their getting their second contracts tend to be in mid-20s, which means that they're entering their best days. They're ascending players, no more of these declining players who are in their 30s whose best days are behind them. So that's what I like, number one. Number two, look, the impact is clear. He's been over 1,000 yards receiving the last 2 years. This year, 1,342 receiving yards on 75 catches. Second team All-Pro. So his best season, guy who's gotten better consistently every year he's been in the NFL. His first year, 748 yards. Second year, 826. 2022 was 1,015. So he broke the 1,000-yard mark last year. And then this year, 1,342 yards. So guy who's clearly ascending. But if you look stylistically, if you were trying to manufacture the perfect complement for Garrett Wilson in a factory, stylistically, Brandon Aiyuk might be the guy you design. Now, I've been very vocal about this, and I do believe it, that at the wide receiver position, I am more worried about just getting quality than I am complementary styles, because receivers succeed in all sorts of different ways. There are many different styles of receiver in the NFL. And sometimes if you get two guys with the exact same skill set, you can overwhelm an opponent. Take the Miami Dolphins with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They've just decided we're going to prioritize speed over everything else. And they're a nightmare to defend. There are other teams through the history of the league that have just focused on getting big receivers, guys who can just box out corners, you throw them jump balls, and the other team can't stop them. The Chargers were like that for a while when they had Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers loved to throw the jump ball, so the Chargers got big receivers who could go win and high point balls in the air. So, you don't necessarily need complementary skill sets. it's more about the quality. But it's a nice thing to have. It's a nice thing to have a guy who complements your other good receiver. And I think Brandon Aiyuk would complement Garrett Wilson perfectly. Now, the two things that both of them do really well, they're both very good route runners. And so from that standpoint, they're Garrett's a little unconventional with the way he wins, but Aiyuk's a tremendous route runner. He knows how to separate, he knows how to shake guys. But there are other things Brandon Aiyuk brings to the table that Garrett Wilson has not really brought to the table so far in the NFL. And one of them is Aiyuk's been a very good, especially this past season, been a very good deep threat. Now, he's not a guy who's that fast, but his route running, his size, these are things that make him a good deep threat. And he's a good contested catch guy, which Garrett is not. And I've seen people suggest that Garrett Wilson, he needs to improve his contested catches. And yeah, look, it would be nice if he did, but you also have to consider, how does that happen? Like, how would Garrett Wilson become a better contested catch guy? And we need to understand the reason Garrett Wilson struggles with that a little bit. And it's because Garrett's a little undersized, a little slender, not a big build. So the way Garrett would improve that would be to add some bulk. But I've seen this over and over in the NFL, and it happens a lot with smaller guys where they add this bulk and they say, I'm going to be a better contested catch guy now. And then the extra muscle kind of slows them down, and they're not quite the same player because they're not as fast. So if you want somebody to make contested catches, yes, I'm sure there are technical points Garrett Wilson can refine. I would like to see him work on it, but I don't want to see Garrett Wilson change his game, because Garrett Wilson's perfectly fine in that area. And I think that if you want somebody to win contested catches, if Aaron Rodgers wants to throw 50-50 balls, well, we know Lazard's not winning them, even though he's big. So just go out and get another big time receiver who can make those catches. And that's what Brandon Aiyuk can do. Brandon Aiyuk, again, also a deep threat, which Garrett Wilson's not really at this point in time. I think Garrett Wilson could be. I think, he's good enough route runner. I think he's fast enough, but he hasn't really set himself apart to this point in his career as a deep threat. So that'd be another thing. But there's another key point here with Brandon Aiyuk. And I think that this is the thing the Jets lack right now at the receiver position. Brandon Aiyuk is not a guy who struggles against press coverage. He's very good at the line of scrimmage. And if you look through the games Garrett Wilson struggled to this point in his career, they've tended to be against more physical corners. Again, Garrett's not like small. He's not like tiny. He's not, Devontae Smith. He's not Elijah Moore. He's not like that small, but he struggles with physical play, and he is a little undersized. And the games where Garrett struggles, not all of them, but a lot of them have a pretty common thread where he's going up against really good corners who are very physical at the line of scrimmage, and they can kind of knock him off his game. Garrett's not great against press coverage. Aiyuk is. Aiyuk's is a difficult guy to press. And against some of the better teams in the league, you're going to face more physical corners. You're going to face guys who get up in your face, who think they can, rough you up. Who've got guys who can really get physical against you and give you problems. And it also makes life easier on Garrett, because at the line of scrimmage, you typically only need one receiver to be at the line of scrimmage, and there's another guy another receiver can play a little bit further back, because really on any given play at the line of scrimmage, you need 7 people on the line. So typically 5 of them are your offensive linemen, one's your tight end, and the last guy is one of your wide receivers. So if Garrett doesn't have to play that role, then that makes life much easier on the New York Jets. So Brandon Aiyuk, tremendous player. I think in many ways, just like a guy who would be a perfect fit for the Jets, even if we get past his quality, which obviously you want great players, but just like the things he brings to the table are many of the things the Jets are lacking right now in the passing game. But of course, if you want something, you have to give up something. And Brandon Aiyuk would cost an awful lot. That's one reason to be a little skeptical about a trade. And as we continue on this Thursday edition of Locked On Jets, I'll give you a couple other potential cons to making a deal like this. They do exist. He is good as Aiyuk is, and we'll delve into those a little bit deeper ahead here on this Thursday edition of Locked On Jets. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to somebody who's unbiased in your life. So today I want to tell you how I really feel about something, and you probably are thinking the same thing this week. We're talking about Brandon Aiyuk today, a tremendous receiver. I'm frustrated that the Jets last offseason neglected the receiver position. The guys they brought in were Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard. Maybe we wouldn't have to be talking about trading for a receiver if the Jets had done a little bit of a better job last offseason. But of course, that's just football. Football's football. Real life is more important. And you should know that therapy can be different for everyone. most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, bonus episodes as needed as news breaks. You should also know that Locked On has launched the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And today on Locked On Jets, we're talking about Brandon Aiyuk, a player who, at least the rumors are starting to swirl that he could be potentially available this offseason. And a lot of that's just based on a couple comments, a couple social media posts. So we don't know how real this is. And more often than not, when there's a star player out there and contract time comes, he starts to make some noise. He wants to put it out there that he's not happy with his contract. So rumors start to fly. And it's in the player's interest. It's in Aiyuk and his agent's interest to float the idea that he could be traded, because it kind of puts pressure on the 49ers to make something happen. We don't know whether he's going to be available. But if he is available, should the Jets make a move? Well, in the first segment, I laid out the case for it. Now, here's the case against it from the Jets standpoint. And I think if we're going into the Jets' mindset this year, the thought process is going to be, this team's going to be all in. This team's going to try and win the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. They're just going to try and load up. The challenge right now is the Jets are very short on resources. As we record this podcast, only about $5 million in cap space. And sometimes I think the wrong thing to do is talk about how much cap space you have, because a team could have a lot of cap space, but if they have no players, if a team has $50 million in cap space and needs 2 starters, that's very different from having $50 million in cap space and needing 10 starters. If you need a lot, then the money doesn't go quite as far. And the Jets have a little cap space and they need a lot. I mean, if you think about it, they need 2 new tackles. They don't have a starting tackle on either left-hand or right-hand side on this team right now. They probably need another offensive lineman, and they need to add multiple receivers. They also need some help on the defensive line. As we record this podcast right now, Quinnen Williams is the only big-time tackle the Jets have who's under contract. He's the only starting caliber defensive tackle right now the Jets have. So while that's a position that can be filled pretty easily and cheaply, and the Jets did that pretty well a year ago, there's a lot the Jets have to do to stretch that $5 million. Now, of course, the amount will go up. They will make some moves. CJ Uzama could be cut and clear up about $5 million in cap space. They could will restructure some deals to push some dead money hits to the future in exchange for lowering cap hits this year and creating space. But the bottom line is they're not going to have a ton of cap room to play with. And you only have really 2 mechanisms to improve your team in the offseason. One is cap space, the other is draft picks. Well, the Jets are short on draft picks this year. They don't have a second-round pick. And the reason that's significant is once you get to the 3rd round, people assume you're getting an immediate starter. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very unlikely. If you look at a given year, maybe like 10% of guys drafted in the 3rd round step into the starting lineup in year 1. So you need to get kind of lucky if you're depending on the 3rd-round pick. So Jets are already pretty short on resources. And the challenge with somebody like Aiyuk is, you have guys who will cost cap space. Those are your free agents. You have guys who will cost draft picks. Those are the guys you select. Aiyuk's the kind of guy who will cost both. And if the goal is to build up the roster this year to make a run in 2024, that's a tough thing to ask, because I think many of us have presumed that, the 10th overall pick in the draft is probably either going to go towards a tackle or a wide receiver. And the way it's likely to play out, because the Jets are so short on resources, is the team will probably focus on one of those 2 spots in free agency. So if they may sign a tackle or 2 in free agency, a guy that they can step into the starting lineup, or they may sign a receiver or 2 in free agency, a guy that they can step into the starting lineup. Now, my general idea, if you can't make a deal for Aiyuk, you sign a bunch of mid-level guys who will be upgrades and at least allow you to enter the draft without being desperate at any given spot. But I think it's more likely the Jets are going to try and make a splash. I think the Jets are going to try and bring as many impact guys as they can to help Rodgers out. So I think you'll either see a pretty significant receiver addition in free agency or a pretty significant tackle addition in free agency, and then the opposite. They'll pick the other. At 10, the pick will go to somebody who plays the other spots. If you do that with Aiyuk, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have to send 10 to San Francisco. Now, maybe they figure out a way to work it out, but the challenge is typically in a trade, the team wants a pick this year, and the Jets don't have a second round pick to send to San Francisco. So, you may offer the idea that, well, if the Jets had a second round pick, maybe they could send this year's second round pick and a future first round pick or something like that. But that's off the table, which means it's almost certain 10 has to go to San Francisco this year in exchange for Aiyuk. And when Aiyuk arrives, he's going to require a big contract. Now, you could structure the deal many different ways. You could structure it to have a low year one cap hits. There are certain things you can do, but at the end of the day, he's going to cost you a lot. Now, is it worth it? I think there's a pretty strong argument you can make. The answer is yes. When you talk about impact, if the Jets were able to get an Aiyuk, you could make the case, maybe the offensive line wouldn't need to be as good because you just have a receiver you can throw the ball out to. When you're under pressure, you can just throw the ball up to him and he can make a play on it. But it is a consideration. And I think what the Jets should do versus what they will do might be two very different things. But I think the Jets' focus is on bringing in as many players as possible. And I think what the Jets would like to do is, I don't think because they're so short-term focused, because they're focused on loading up this roster this year for Rodgers, I don't think they're going to care as much about bringing in like an older receiver who maybe costs a little bit less than Aiyuk, who maybe you don't have to pay as much because if you sign like a Mike Evans, you don't have to give up a draft pick for Mike Evans. Mike Evans may not be here much longer. He certainly won't be here longer than Aiyuk would be, but Mike Evans won't cost you draft picks. So that way, if you sign a Mike Evans, you can address receiver, and then at 10, you may be able to address the tackle position. You can do both. And of course, there's also the idea that, let's say the Jets sign a tackle in free agency and they want to draft a receiver like a Roma Duze out of Washington. Well, if you draft a guy at 10, he's cheaper than Aiyuk will be the next couple of years. Now, there's a risk because Aiyuk's the proven commodity, but that's, a couple of years ago, there were rumors about the Jets going out and getting a veteran receiver. They drafted Garrett Wilson at 10. Well, Garrett Wilson cost much cheaper than some of the veteran guys they would have had to pay for. So you save a little bit of money there, and that's the benefit of the draft, to get the cost control player. So those are I guess to the extent there are drawbacks, those are the things to consider. To get something good, you have to give up something good, and the Jets would be getting something really good with Aiyuk, which means they'd probably have to give up an awful lot. I've given you the case for trading for Aiyuk. I've given you the case against trading for Aiyuk. Now it's time to reach the final verdict, and that's what we'll do as we continue on this Thursday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. You should not have to worry when you're buying last-minute tickets to the next big event. Game Time's the fast and easy way to buy all the tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I've used it myself. I've used it a number of occasions. I've bought tickets to a football game. I've bought tickets to a Broadway show. I've bought tickets to tennis. Really simple to use, really easy. And all these were last minute ticket purchases. All of these I bought within 3 hours of the event. That's why Game Time is so convenient. And I got great deals every time I've used it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, locked on for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Thursday. We're talking about the Jets potentially trading for Brandon Aiyuk. And of course, when I talk about this, I'm also taking for granted something that may not happen. The 49ers may not want to trade Brandon Aiyuk. In fact, if I was the 49ers, I would not be looking to trade him at all. I think it's much more logical for the 49ers to lock him up long term. Look, Aiyuk's on a winning team right now. If the Niners offer him a new contract with the money he's looking for, he's probably going to get it. He's probably going to sign on for it because it's just very logical. You're on a good team. You've produced there. They've shown they know how to use you. You're winning. You're going to the Super Bowl every year. You have a little unfinished business because your team lost the Super Bowl in overtime this year. If you get the money you're looking for, you're probably going to stay. So there's really no guarantee he's going to be traded. In fact, I'd say it's more likely than not he'll be back in San Francisco next year on a new contract. But hypothetically, if he's available and if the Jets have the opportunity to trade for him, should they make the move? And we've gone through the pros, we've gone through the cons. Now, the other caveat here, of course, is that it depends on what the San Francisco 49ers are looking for. If they're looking for 3 first-round picks, that would not be a very smart move for the Jets to make. But let's say it's a market value type deal. Aiyuk will agree to a market value type contract with the Jets. Is this the type of move they should pursue? And for me, the answer is pretty easy. And I think when I laid out the case, I tried to give you the pros and the cons. It seemed to me like the pros vastly outweigh the cons here. And part of this is the battle of what the Jets should do versus what they will do. What should the Jets do this offseason? I don't think they should just torch all their future resources just to try and load up around Rodgers in 2024. I think there has to be some a better balance than there was last year. I think the Jets should try and improve their team this offseason. They should make their team as good as possible around Rodgers for 2024. But there has to be balance. You can't just give up all your future resources going all in 2024 because it's going to be very difficult for the Jets to build a championship caliber roster in 2024. And I think Aiyuk's actually a pretty good balance because he will vastly improve this receiving group. And, I think about the guys the Jets brought in last year. I think about Alan Lazard and I think about Randall Cobb, and these were friends of Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers thought he wanted them around. The thing is, with a great player, sometimes they don't know what's good for them. Sometimes they just want to bring in their buddies and they think, well, I can make anybody look good. LeBron James does this all the time. He's done this. He did this in Cleveland. He did this with the Lakers, where he just brings in his friends. He's like, I can make it work with anybody. I want to play with my friends. And sometimes you need the team to say, you know what, this is a better idea. You'll like this a lot better. And you bring in somebody like an Aiyuk. I think if you do that, Aaron Rodgers will be like, yeah, this is pretty good. I like this idea. This was so. The thing with Aiyuk, though, is that even though he improves your team in 2024, it doesn't come at the expense of the future past 24. Because, again, he's only going to be 26, which means he should be here for a long time if the Jets were able to get him. And, we always talk in the offseason about filling holes. We always talk about what needs need to be addressed. But I also like to think about it in a different way. I like to think about building strengths. And I like to think about how if you have a 1-2 punch like Brandon Aiyuk and Garrett Wilson, and Garrett would slide into and be like one of the best number 2 receivers in the league if the Jets were able to get Aiyuk. But if you have those two, I mean, those are guys who you can count on probably the next 5 to 6 years. And we talk about heading into the offseason, well, what holes do we need to fill? If you have these two guys around, wide receiver is not going to be a hole for the rest of the decade. And that's really should be the focus. It's not just about, plugging my short-term needs, because if you go out and get like a 35-year-old guy receiver this year, and I know some of the guys I've mentioned, Mike Evans is not 35, but you go out and get a guy in his 30s this year, maybe you plug the hole for a year or two. But once we get to 2025, 2026, that's going to be a hole again. If you get a guy in his prime, then you've got somebody who you've locked in probably for about 5 to 6 years. And that's a real benefit to your football team. And I'd even take it a step further. When you look at, again, how teams win in the NFL, they're not winning the Jets way. They're not winning the Jets way with just one overwhelming strength and another area of overwhelming weakness. I always hear this debate these days, offense versus defense. Should you have a good offense or a good defense? Well, you look at a lot of the great teams in the league. Most of them have top offenses and top defenses. Trying to win the Jets way without an offense, at least what they tried to do in 2023, it doesn't work. Because the teams in this league the great teams in this league are balanced. And if you add an Aiyuk, then the Jets offense actually has a chance to succeed in this league. So I just think that there are lots of reasons. And yeah, I understand he'll cost a lot. Well, guess what? Getting something great, you get what you pay for sometimes. And yeah, I understand you're giving up a draft. You're probably giving up draft picks and you're giving a big contract. But for a wide receiver who was a 1,300-yard guy, who was a second-team All-Pro, who seems to be ascending, to me, that's worth it, because you're getting both the short-term benefit. You're keeping Aaron Rodgers happy, but you're also adding a player who can help break in your next quarterback. Because, in a year or two, the Jets are probably going to have to draft another young quarterback. And we've seen through the years that when the Jets put young quarterbacks in bad situations, it simply does not work out. So in the long run, what you're doing is you're guaranteeing that a young quarterback you draft is going to have two great receivers to throw the ball to. And maybe that'll help the next quarterback develop a little bit better than Zach Wilson or Sam Darnold, because the Jets did not do a great job with either of those guys putting the correct supporting cast around them. So anyway, for me, this is a no-brainer. As much as I can see the cons, that's just because any move has cons and any move has an opportunity cost. If I look at this objectively, I see a move the Jets should be all over if he becomes available. And then, of course, is the caveat is that we don't know he's actually going to become available. I have my doubts. But anyway, I'd love to hear what you have to say. about this topic, but that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast for us, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, please give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Hope you have a great Thursday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to close out the week.